Hello and welcome to the Friday show presented by Woodbine. It's the penultimate weekend of racing. Couple of Ontario bred stakes on Saturday, then the mile-and-a-half graded valedictory on Sunday. Mile-and-a-half on the all-weather. I love races like that. I'm Ray Paulick, joined by Bloodstock editor Joe Nevills, and we've got Tom Amoss with us. You know him from the Fox show on New York. You know him from the 2019 Kentucky Oaks that he won with Serengeti Empress. And I think now a lot of people know him because of a hot filly he's got named Hoosier Philly, Philly, not Filly, who just last weekend ran a record of 3-0 with a really impressive win in the Grade 2 Goldenrod at Churchill Downs. Tom, welcome to the Friday show.
Thank you, Ray. Joe, I appreciate it. It's my honor.
So, 3 for 3. This filly has got a lot going for her. She's by Into Mischief, just the hottest sire in the country, in the world. She's out of a Tapit mare, which suggests that maybe there's some stamina there. Very high priced yearling, $510,000. She's got speed. She appears to have unlimited talent. Tell us a little bit about how you got Hoosier Philly and first impressions, I guess, when she started training for you.
Sure. So we bought her last year at the Keeneland Fall Sale as a yearling. Lauren Carlisle, Black Dog, Bloodstock is her company name. Found her and picked her out, showed her to me. I liked her as well. And so we went hard for that horse. It's a lot of money to spend for something that I typically purchase at the sales. By contrast, Serengeti Empress was a $70,000 yearling purchase at that same sale when she was a yearling, and of course, as everyone knows, she went on to win the Kentucky Oaks. So $510,000 is a big step out for me to purchase. But Lauren stood behind the horse, and the clients were into it. So we purchased her, and like everything that we buy at the time you buy it, we liked her. She was athletic, long and rangy. And she went down to Woodford Farm, as did all of our yearlings, and prepared for their time to come to the track, which was in the following spring. And she came back to Keeneland, as a matter of fact, to begin her training. So that was the process of getting her from the sale to be broke and taught different lessons, and then getting her to the track to start getting her fit. And that's where things got interesting. So she was getting ready to run at Churchill, but she was almost too fast for her own good, and she suffered a minor setback, which happens with a lot of young horses. She had some soreness in her shins, and we get that a lot. In its worst case, it can be a shin buck, but it's all about the development of bone in the horse's shins versus how much they're doing on the racetrack. And you couldn't contain her. She was too good and too fast. So we had to stop on her, and then we brought her back, and she was everything that she showed to be earlier. But at that point, when we brought her back, we'd had a number of 2-year-olds that had won either at Churchill or surrounding tracks. We were able to start matching her up with competition to see exactly what she was. And she was so dominant over our other horses that we had to start working with older horses just for me to feel like she was getting something out of the workouts. And even the older horses couldn't keep up with her. So before she ever made her first start, which was the end of September, we knew we had something different than we have ever had before. And I've been doing this since 1987. I said before she ever ran, I've never had one get ready like she's getting ready. And when she started displaying in the afternoons, it became clear to me that we have a really special horse, most special horse I've ever had.
So you mentioned the early injury troubles, and I got thinking about a lot of the horses that we've seen come and go throughout the years that have a lot of potential, but then a little something knocks them off their stride. They never quite meet that. And so far, Hoosier Philly's exceeded that. As as a horseman, what goes through your head when a horse sort of fills that potential and, so far doing really well?
There's a great deal of satisfaction when you win races, but I've won them at every level. But when I can win a race with just a mid-level claimer, and I feel like our process made a difference in that horse's performance that day, like I was really involved in getting that horse to the winner's circle, that's a wonderful feeling. Hoosier Philly is a brilliant talent, and I remember watching a behind the music VH1 special on Michael Jackson, and his producer for one of his albums was talking about how he was criticizing Michael for something that was going to go into the album, and he then turned to himself and introspectively said, "What am I doing? The guy's a musical genius. I just need to stay out of his way." Hoosier Philly is brilliant, and my job is to make sure she stays healthy and stay the hell out of her way. She's really good.
Is there a sense of relief that goes with that too, because you've stayed out of her way and she lives up to that too?
Well, that's a really that's a question that I deal with daily. So you're leading up to a race. You've put it out there. Look, I have always been very upfront with the betting public about my horses, and I made it clear that I thought this was one of the best horses I'd ever had, if not the best, and that was before she ever ran. So there comes a sense of responsibility to not only the betting public, but to your own reputation and what you know as a horseman when you run one like this. And so a lot of pressure going into every one of her races, and almost a sense of relief when she crosses the finish line in front, and then a lot of worry on a day-to-day basis that she stays healthy. Joe, you mentioned it earlier. The key to a horse's longevity is, of course, its health. Once you know they're good, and so she's at the farm in Ocala by design, and we'll come back to the fairgrounds right after Christmas. And I go to sleep every night and wonder about her. When we shipped her down there, as a matter of fact, I called the van driver 2 different times on the road between Louisville and Ocala to make sure everything was going well. And he told his boss, he goes, "Does this guy micromanage that much? Does he call about horses that he has vanning this place or that place?" Which I've had many. And the answer is a big no. I don't usually do that, but she makes me worry, and I think about her a lot.
So she's 3 for 3, all at Churchill Downs. Interestingly, I've never seen this comment line in a past performance before. From her second start, the Rags to Riches run on the slop, it says "splashed away, frolicked." I've never seen
Frolicked.
I've never seen an Equibase chart caller say a horse frolicked before. Was she frolicking out there that day?
Knew, I knew you were gonna. As soon as you brought that chart up, that was the word that stood out to me. She frolicked home, whatever frolicking home means. I don't know that she frolicked home, but if you watch her second race, which is the one you're referring to, the Rags to Riches, or her last race, which were the 2 times
Right.
she went a distance. Her first race was a very short sprint. If you watch either of those races, you see a dominant performance, a horse that comes to the lead at the head of the lane. And literally, as you look at the other riders and what they're doing on the competition, their hands are moving hard, which is a sign of encouraging the horse to run faster. And Edgar Morales on Hoosier Philly, his hands are perfectly still. He looks like a statue on her, and she's just swallowing up the horses and passing them with the greatest of ease. That's the it factor that I wish I knew what to look for at the sale. That it factor, because she certainly has it, but it's inert, and you just don't know who's got it and who doesn't, but she definitely has it.
Tom, did you get a slight case of Derby fever when she crossed the line? Because I saw some comments from you saying that you're thinking of putting her on the road to the Kentucky Derby instead of the road to the Kentucky Oaks.
So I'm trying to describe to the general public how good I think she is, and I've done it on more than one occasion, talking about her and trying to find the superlatives that will let people know that, man, this guy, I mean, maybe he's not the kind of guy like Pletcher or Chad Brown that gets champions all the time, but I mean, he's really speaking up on behalf of his horse. And so, I guess in a sense, in bragging on her and bragging how good she is, and I don't mean in an arrogant way. I'm not speaking myself. I'm talking about her talent, her natural ability. I've never had anything like her, and just to put something emphasis on the comments I was making at the end, I said, look, I've actually flirted with the idea of putting her on the Kentucky Derby Trail, and that comment was taken as a standalone comment. Fair enough, but look, she has taken great care of me to this point. My intention is to take great care of her, and I'm not going to do anything with her that she doesn't suggest she's ready for. Right now, there are other young fillies out there that are more accomplished than what she's faced to this point. And we need to see how she does against those. But I have full confidence that what you guys have seen so far is going to continue into the spring.
So you mentioned the ride
By the way,
by
Ray, I'm running
Edgar.
for office. Ray, Ray, I'm running for office next month with that answer. How'd I do?
Listen, you got my vote.
You did all right.
So you mentioned the ride by Edgar Morales, and he's a jockey that you've really trusted with some of your best horses over the past few years. Can you talk about the sort of working relationship between you and Edgar and why you've sort of chosen him to ride a lot of your big ones?
Yeah, so it started 2 summers ago at Indiana. At the time, it was Indiana Grand. They just sold it. It's now Horseshoe Indianapolis, but it was Indiana Grand then. And Edgar caught my eye with a couple of rides he made on other people's horses, and I wasn't committed to any one rider there, so I thought, I'm gonna give this guy a shot. And he's got tremendous talent of a real skill of getting a horse out of the gate properly, which is very, very important. And then he's got great strength when he finishes up on a horse. If there's something that holds him back, it's nothing that bothers me, but certainly might to other people. He's shy. He's a shy personality, so he's not going to come across as most riders, and a lot of trainers too. You gotta have a lot of self-confidence to be a horse trainer, and you gotta have a lot of self-confidence to be a rider, so you can come across as almost braggadocious, and he's 180 from that. So I think people are just starting to learn about Edgar Morales. And look, if I'm a part of what's making him popular, what he has in my barn, I'm glad to do it.
If you've done the Fox shows, and I think was it last summer you were mic'd up for pre-race instructions with a jockey, or just out in the paddock. If you were mic'd up for the goldenrod, what would we have heard you telling Edgar before the race?
So the ownership group came down to the paddock for that race. They were all there. I say group because although it just reads Rod Radcliffe and Bill Stone, they have families, wives, girlfriends, children, etc. And so it was a big group that came for the race, and they really enjoy being a part of it. So I gave the instructions in front of them, and when Edgar came over to the middle of the Churchill Downs paddock, which is kind of an island where all the owners stand, I just told him, I said, "Look, you're on the best horse. If something goes wrong, don't panic. She'll overcome it." And so I did not give any instructions other than that. She broke well. She was able to get an outside position against the pace. Down the backside, she probably was 5 lengths off the lead. And I can tell you internally, without sounding cocky, internally I was thinking, no horse is going to beat this filly unless they're a lot more than 5 lengths in front of her with a half mile to go. And she swallowed them up.
Yeah, it looked like he was just trying to keep her in the clear, especially into that first turn. I think a filly drifted out in front of her, and he just decided there's no reason to get behind horses in this race.
That's exactly right. I mean, without getting into a lot of detail, I totally agree with that.
So Ray mentioned you getting mic'd up before the race up in Saratoga this year. I absolutely loved that feature. That was something that I hope they do a lot more in the future. And I'm curious to get the thoughts from your side on that experience. What was it like, kind of knowing that people are watching you in what's often a very private moment at the racetrack? The time speaking to the jockey, speaking to the connections. Unless you're within earshot, most people aren't picking that up. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, it didn't bother me in the sense that I'm the only thing that I might get in trouble for is what I might say to a rider after the race. But being mic'd up, I didn't have a problem with that, and I didn't play to the camera or anything like that. I just did my job. But I will say this, Joe, it really surprised me. The next morning, it was early, 5:30. The track had just opened at Saratoga. I was up in the grandstand. We were working a horse. And there were a couple of people up there, including Bobby Flay. And Bobby stopped me, and he said, that piece on the Fox show yesterday you guys did with you in the paddock, he said, it's absolute racing gold. We need more of that in racing. And that caught me off guard because I really didn't think it was anything that special. But then I heard from so many people that agree with that comment, and now you're saying it too. It seems to me that as we try to move the sport forward, we try to make it more interesting to the average fan, that, there are plenty of people in big races that I'm not a part of for sure. Because in a sense, I am a bit of a fringe player when it comes to the very biggest races. But there are plenty of people that could do the same thing that I did, and it's not invasive at all. And I think, as we try to move the sport forward, we all, as participants, need to think of ways to help make this sport grow. And I hope to see more trainers do that sort of thing.
How did that come about? Who kind of pitched who on that?
Yeah, so the group came to me, the Fox group came to me and asked if I'd be uncomfortable with it. And the only thing I wanted to do was make sure my owners were okay with it that had the horse in that day. I just wanted to make sure that they weren't, they didn't feel like they were being invasive or anything like that. And that horse, by the way, was a Maggie Moss owned horse, Taiwanaku. And so I called Maggie and I asked her about it, and Maggie bought into the idea of doing it right away. She recognized what it was and how it could possibly help, and she was 100% behind it.
So you're New Orleans native. You split your time between Kentucky and Fairgrounds. I believe I know you go to New York for Saratoga. There's a changing dynamics in racing right now, with Kentucky having incredibly strong purses. Turfway Park opened this week to maiden races running for $75,000, I think, for Kentucky breds. Is that changing what your strategy is, what your plan is with your stable?
Well, I mean, look, as we sit here right now today, Churchill Downs has just put a lockdown on the facilities for a herpes virus positive, so no horses can leave Churchill. The fairgrounds in New Orleans is entering today, and they're having trouble filling that card based on that rule being put into place. But more to the long-term result of those higher purses, Ray, is a dynamic that I think the industry needs to be really worried about. And that is what's happening in races for claim. And claim means, of course, that you can buy the horse out of the race for a certain price. And I mean, probably 70% of our races are claiming races, and maybe it drops down to about 60% in Kentucky. But in any given claiming race in Kentucky, there are multiple claims in for horses. And the claiming is dominated by the bigger stables, myself included. And for a smaller stable, when they do lose a horse for claim, and look, these horses that look like they're in the right spot, like 6-1 or less in a race, they're gone in Kentucky. You're going to lose that horse. So for the smaller stables, they oftentimes can't replace that horse. And even if they want to replace that horse, when they go back in to claim another horse, you're competing against 8 other guys that want the same horse. You could go months without getting a horse. For a large stable, they can take that kind of hit of losing some horses and not gaining back to full strength. A small stable can't do that. And we've seen over the past few years, the smaller guys starting to bow out of the industry. And that is a huge concern. The bigger stables are getting even bigger. The middle stables are getting a little smaller, and the smaller stables are exiting. And once that keeps happening, you're going to see a real shift of the horses to all the big stables. So we put up a race in a given day. It's a high-level allowance race, and all the horses are in 5 different barns for 5 different trainers, but you're trying to make a 10-horse field. So if you're going to pick all the quality horses and be just in a few stables, you're never going to have big fields in your races. And field size makes betting, and betting makes purses. So if we can't continue to get big fields because the training groups are shrinking to a smaller size, and I just had this conversation with Buff Bradley when he decided to retire, and I called him on the phone, and I told him how much I was going to miss him being around, because he's a great example of a smaller stable that did it right, handled himself with class. We need people like that. We need those small stables. The bigger stables that are out there have earned their right to get these other horses. They've done really, really well. But they need to also recognize that without more spread out horses, and by that I mean more trainers to have horses, it's going to hurt them in the end too. So go no further than the Keeneland sales, to use an example, and how many horses are bought by, 4 or 5 trainers with different groups underneath them. Those horses become 2-year-olds. They dominate the 2-year-old races. Those horses become 3-year-olds. They dominate the 3-year-old races. And each year they're again buying yearlings in large amounts. Those big stables, and I don't mean to name any names. I'm not going to do that, but we all know who they are going to have too many horses, and the horses aren't going to be spread out enough. And I think that's a real problem for racing.
Yeah, it's we see it happening not just in Kentucky, but California. There's filling,
For sure.
filling some of the 2-year-old races. That's what was amazing to me about the card that was put on last Saturday at Churchill Downs. 12 races for 2-year-olds, and they were all big fields. I don't know
Right.
another place that could do that. I don't. It's amazing to me that they could fill all of those races with 2-year-olds.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. That would be very, very difficult card to fill anywhere else in the nation. I don't care where it is. Kentucky gets to draw from a lot of different areas, not just the Churchill Downs backside, the Keeneland backside, the Turfway Park backside, different training centers around the state. There's a lot of horses to draw from in Kentucky, and that helps a great deal.
Well, listen, Tom, we want to wish you the best with Hoosier Philly. After she gets a break, she's going to come back. What are you looking at for maybe a first start of 2023?
So there's a prep to the Fairgrounds Oaks at Fairgrounds on the 18th or 19th of February. I'm not sure which day it is. I believe it's the Rachel Alexander. It's the one race before the Fairgrounds Oaks, and it's our goal to be in that race. We'll see how she does in there. And assuming she comes back to a 2-year-old form, I think she'll be very tough to beat. And we'll evaluate her after that race and decide what's next.
I guess that could be a prep for the Louisiana Derby as well, couldn't it?
Well, I was telling you about what a great politician I was with that last answer, idiot. And I guess you didn't hear me loud and clear. I think it would be a great prep for any race we choose after that.
All right. Well, Tom, thanks for joining us this week on the Friday show. We really appreciate it. Wishing you all the best. I hope you have a great meeting at the Fairgrounds, and looking forward to seeing Hoosier Philly back in 2023.
Thank you very much, Ray. Joe, I appreciate it. And I know I probably won't talk to you before then, so Merry Christmas, you guys.
Thanks so much. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's Friday show. Again, thanks to Tom Amoss for joining us as well.
Support award-winning independent horse industry journalism and become a Paulick Report Insider on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, insiders get access to exclusive Q&As with Paulick Report staff, insight behind our editorial process, exclusive opinions and on-site analysis, Paulick Report merch, and more. This is not a paywall. The website you know and love will always be the same. But if you want more, and you want to make our coverage even better, visit patreon.com/Paulick Report and become a Paulick Report Insider today.